got Roy here, and I was in two minds as to whether to let him in. Roy, you need to settle and be quiet if you're going to stay. He just likes to be in the same room. Hopefully he will settle down. And we won't get interruptions. But faith, deconstruction and reconstruction, it's a journey. And I've been reflecting on this and how it's not about returning to faith, not like going off doing your own thing and then realizing, actually, I need to come home. It's not that kind of thing. It's not an interruption in the journey, as we've had an interruption. It's actually a necessary part of the journey. So it's almost, the way we can think of it is that we are being guided into the deconstruction, into the not knowing. So the theme of this video is not knowing being a good thing, not a bad thing. And I don't think that anybody who belongs to a faith, an established faith, would ever tell you that, would ever give you that word of advice. It's always about having more faith, coming home to the faith, being a practicing Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim, whatever. And yet, we see examples of the not knowing being an important part of growth. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today. Now, what I'm going to be using to help me, and I love this version of the Bible that I'm going to be reading from, which I did talk about in my last video. Every time I hold it up, it'll just take, I know this happened last time, it takes everything very dark, makes everything else very dark because it's adjusting, the camera is trying to adjust. The New Testament, a translation, a second edition translation by David Bentley Hart. You can see who David Bentley Hart is by putting his name into YouTube. It'll bring up videos and you can get a flavour of his personality. He's really clever. I don't understand everything he says. He's a professor, a biblical scholar. He understands the Greek. He has a personal faith. And that personal faith is driven by this need to get back to the original and really understand what it's all about. So to circumnavigate all of the established understanding about the words of Jesus, about the Bible, built on translations of the Bible, and then, of course, all of the doctrines and everything else that came and all the different dogmas of the different denominations. So really get back to the original. And it's fresh and it's exciting. It is helping me so much in my reconstruction stage because I don't feel that when you're so familiar with the text and you try to come back to it and hope for something fresh and it's just not happening. It's like trying to go back to a relationship that you know is not working and you just know the spark isn't there. And yet I know the spark is there with Jesus. Just can't get on with Christianity. And if that resonates, then you might really enjoy this coming fresh, using this as a tool. And I'm going to be using it regularly on this channel. But, somebody says here, look, in Hart's hands, the words of Jesus and his followers produce shivers of mere, not shivers of mere approximation, but rather shivers of awe at the clarity, poignancy, and simplicity of this complex treatise. Hart is brilliant. His translation has the great virtue of reminding us that this text is not safe. If we think it's familiar, we are in error. Hallelujah to that. In other words, it's not set in stone as we think it is. We can go back to it, and just by looking afresh at the grammar, even taking the translation and not just filling in the gaps to think, oh, this is how it would work grammatically in English, but to give a more literal, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the more literal rendering of the text, so that then you think, oh gosh, that gives a fresh way of thinking of it. It makes a world of difference. Just a word can make a world of difference to how we understand it. And there'll be an example of that in what I'm going to be sharing. Disarmingly beautiful. It will be a long time before I put Hart's translation back on the shelf. It's lots of praise for it. And I'm actually finding that as I'm reading a little bit from it each night, it's starting to, I don't know, it's like an activation. It's lighting something up in me. and allowing me to get closer to the meaning. So what happened for me earlier, oh, this is funny, I will share this. I've been so busy of late that I just haven't been doing my usual sort of quiet time. And I decided for me, a quiet time isn't Bible study, isn't doing that, opening the Bible reading and work your way through. So you just think it's like, kind of what someone else is telling you, this is the meaning. And I just can't do that. I just can't do it. Can't do it. And is it meditation? Kind of meditation. I would say it's contemplation. It's just sitting and listening. It's just making a time to sit and listen. And with the heart say, I want to connect. I love you. I want to connect with this loving presence that I know is real and the only thing that I'm holding on to. The baby, not the bathwater, okay? So I sit with that and I do this thing where I've sat for 18 minutes, and I was doing it so regularly for only about 6 weeks last year. And it was during this time, I was only just reflecting on this earlier, that it was while I was doing that actually I was led to this job that I now have, that I've spoken about before, that I would never have dreamed I would do. And it's enriching me so much, and it's kind of taking me back into a faith community, but with the opportunity to really be true to me and where I am in my journey. You couldn't have asked for anything better. And finding that I'm even more effective in ministry, if you want to use that word, than I would have been if I'd have just stayed in the lane faithfully for all the year. I'd just be churning out the same regular conventional narrative. And yet people that I'm meeting are needing to be able to express themselves and not feel judged, because they've actually experienced the world and lots of different philosophies, and I'm able to say, yeah, get you, I can meet you where you're at. I understand that. I've done the same myself. Yeah, talk about meditation, yoga, yeah, without being judged. Anyway, I'm kind of going off at a tangent a little bit, and I've lost my track on what I was saying. But I'm going to start reading. Anyway, I'm going to start reading here. That's what I was wanting to say. I haven't been doing that recently, this set time. And then I found I've not been sleeping, and I've been just not falling off to sleep. Like my mind's been active. And last night was the first night I didn't have to get up for work today. But the first time I thought, this is a little prompting. If I can't get to sleep, I got up, came into this room, sat quietly. I think it was 2 a.m, and put the light on and opened it at this page. And the downloads that you get when you make that time. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, because we need our sleep, and sleep shouldn't be interrupted if we can help it. But it was okay, because this is the weekend, and I think that really what it was, what they're saying, and I say my team, the council, that's the way I speak about spirit, and I understand it now, is saying, look, we've got stuff to share with you, and if you're too busy and you can't make time, how are we going to have we need to have what is it that you have when you're sort of on a team at work? You'd have a debriefing and you have a briefing, and it's a collaboration. How are we going to get through to you if you're not making time in the day? So that's just a nudge that I need to do that, because there's important stuff that needs to be shared. And what I was being shown is that the way to approach this, as we reconstruct the way we approach scripture, with a version that you're comfortable with and that works for you, and doesn't just kind of put up your barriers and turn you off because of past associations, so that you have this defense thing, is to enter imaginatively into the situation and allow it to be almost like dreams and symbols, have symbolism, imagery, metaphor. In the same way that you would read cards, you're using images and intuitive readings at the same time as the text, and leaning in and listening. And this is what I was doing. And I was so excited by what I got that I wanted to share that today. That's been a really long introduction, but let's get to it. So I'm reading from, in this new version, John chapter 20. John's Gospel, chapter 20. Now, on the first day of the Sabbath week, while it is still dark, notice it says, on the first day of the Sabbath week, while it is still dark. That's the first thing that came to my attention. This is in the present tense, not while it was still dark. These are the little things that would get changed in translation to say, let's make it consistent. We'll just keep it all in the past tense, third person past tense. And the first thing they brought my attention to, while it is still dark, Mary the Magdalene comes to the tomb and sees that the stone has been removed from the tomb. All of it. She comes to, she sees that present tense. It's inviting us into the present moment, like it is happening for us now. And even just in the phrasing of that, it just takes us away from thinking of it as an historical story or event to an invitation to a mystical encounter. We enter imaginatively into it, as you would with a guided visualization. It makes it immediate for us. So she runs away and comes to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, him whom Jesus loved, and says to them, right, I was stopped there. It mentions Peter by name. And then this other disciple, him whom Jesus loved, let's just drop the him, but it's whom Jesus loved. The point is, who is this mystery person who isn't named? There's the invitation again. This is you. This is you to step into that space. It's not named for a reason. You can fill that disciple, that follower. Peter represents the one who is named, and we know that Peter was the rock on which the church was built, and that's something for another video about the church and what it actually does say in the text. It doesn't have to be translated as church, but we know in history and how it unfolded in this worldly existence, all right, on planet Earth. It was the way in which the church was established via the lineage of Peter. I say lineage by the the laying on of hands, the apostolic apostolic progression they call it, and then you have the church, and then we get the church splitting, and we get all the different denominations, and then we get the theology, the development of theology, and the division of the communion, which is still to this day. The community is divided within the Christian church. So you have establishment and mysticism here side by side. Why do I say mysticism? Because the one whom Jesus loved, the love, the heart connection with Jesus is what defines this person. All right, not liturgical lineage, but heart alliance. All right, and when she tells them they took the Lord out of the tomb and we do not know where they have put him, it says, so Peter and the other disciple went forth and came to the tomb, and the two of them were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead more quickly than Peter and came to the tomb first. That's an indication that this person is led by a heart desire and a passion, because he's running quickly. He gets there first. And he's going directly. He's not going via Peter. Peter represents the church in this symbolic reading of it. He's not going via the priest and the pastor and what your pastor tells you and what the doctrines tell you and all this. He's going direct, a direct knowing through a relationship with Jesus, a heart relationship of love. Is this speaking to you? So when they get there, I love the way that it's just written. And bending down, he sees the winding sheets lying there. You can just visualize it with the way that they're all sort of crumpled up, the winding sheets laying there, and the kerchief that had been on his head, not lying together with the sheets, but apart, folded up in a place of its own. Really interesting that we get a lot of detail about that. And those of you who are interested and have looked into the studies that have been done, there is a really lovely forensic one that has been done about the Shroud of Turin, and how this coheres with there being a separate sheet for the head that covered the head, and how the blood is actually be able to see through DNA and all stuff like that. About that the wounds were caused as a result of trauma and consistent with crucifixion. Anyway, I won't go into that in more detail, but it was just interesting that I noticed it does mention this kerchief. So the other disciple, the one having come first to the tomb, also entered, and he saw and had faith. So Peter goes in. Did I say that Peter went in? Wait a minute, Peter. Yeah. So Peter comes following after him and entered the tomb. He goes straight in. What does the tomb represent? What might this be symbolically? The tomb is a place of burial. It's a place of death. It's a place of stagnation. It's a place of darkness. It's the place of the dead. And here is where Peter, representing the church, is. He goes in. So make of that what you will. But Jesus isn't there. There's only the remnants of what Jesus was, or the fact that he was once there, but he's not there now. And then the other disciple goes in also. Now, for me, this is church institution and mysticism trying to work together, trying to find a location or a way of localizing the story about Jesus and faith in Jesus. And what do they both say? It says, so the other disciple, the one having come first to the tomb, also entered, and he saw and had faith. Verse 9, for as yet they did not know the scripture that it is necessary for him to rise again from the dead. So it says he saw and had faith. This is going immediately to faith. Faith is believing something. And believing is with the mind. It's a decision the mind makes to believe. All right, so you have an alliance between established belief system, and mysticism. And it's a difficult alliance, and that we've seen that in the church. It's not a comfortable one. It's a kind of a dance, if we want to say a dance. Sometimes it feels more like a tug of war. All right? But that's perhaps what we know and recognize, those of us who've been in the Christian faith, whatever church you're at, and know the tension exists through your own personal knowing of Jesus and what the church is telling you about Jesus. Now I'm going to move on. Verse 10. So the disciples went away home again, but Mary stood outside by the tomb weeping. So she's not in the tomb. She stood outside the tomb weeping. Remember what we've established that the tomb represents? It's the shell, the localized memory of the historical Jesus. Okay? Trying to pin him down. Trying to find him. And the weeping is that stage, that necessary stage of grief. As part of the deconstruction process, this is what came to my mind. This is what they were showing me. Heaven was telling me, as I leaned in to listen, that the weeping is part of the deconstruction and the grief that comes with deconstruction. He wasn't there. He wasn't there anymore. It was empty. That place where she expected to find him was empty. As she was weeping then, she bent down into the tomb. Bent down. Oh, that's interesting. Bent down. Think of her just going into the tomb like this, but bending down is implying maybe a vibrational shift, lower rather than higher. And she sees two angels in white standing there. Isn't it interesting that she has to go down? She has to go to that place of grief, heartbreak. And then she sees two angels standing there. Now, they didn't see the men. They didn't see two angels. So we've got an example here that, or a modeling here, that through that brokenness, there is a breakthrough into an enlightenment, a greater seeing and knowing. She has an encounter with two angels. She sees something they didn't see. One at the head and one at the feet of the body where Jesus had lain. And they say to her, so there's a communication. Madam, why are you weeping? She says to them, they took away my Lord, and I do not know where they put him. They took away my Lord, and I do not know where he is. That's why I'm weeping. And that's the experience of Mary the disciple. How do we know she's the disciple? Because later on, further on, we're going to get to this another time. I'm not going to try and do everything today. I'm going to work my way through this chapter. She says Rabboni later on. She says, so implying that she was a disciple. She recognizes and acknowledges him as teacher. But it's the point that she doesn't know where he's gone, and she doesn't know where to find him. And that signifies a necessary stage of the journey for those of us, you and I, who are in that process of deconstructing. And it's a place of emptiness. The tomb is empty, and we are empty because he's not there. I can't go back in. I can't make him be there in the way that he was before. It's an empty tomb, it's hollow, and it's a place of stagnation and death. It's like when you try to go back, but it's just not, you can't fake it. And so you feel abandoned, you feel like you're in no man's land. That's what deconstruction feels like. But this story of hope is that she's outside the tomb. And thereafter, as we'll find when we read on next time, all of her encounters are outside of the tomb, outside of the place that Peter was, outside of the church. Maybe. These images that come, when you use this method, and I believe it's called the Ignatian method, where you enter imaginatively into the text, it's always inspired, but it's always localized, it's always subjective, it's always for you, the individual who's coming to scripture, and always for a time, a season. I might read this again in a week's time, in a month's time, and it have a different meaning because Spirit's giving something else. But that was what came to me last night that I wanted to share with you. And so if you too can identify with Mary at that moment, they've taken him away and I don't know where they've taken him. I don't know where he is. If you're at that place of not knowing, then be encouraged that that's exactly where you need to be. And that the place of real wisdom is the heart, not the head. We don't need to have all the answers. But know that this is the journey. And the story doesn't end here with the empty tomb and the not knowing. And it won't for you in your life. And so in the next video, we're going to just think about the significance of Mary, the feminine, and the feminine aspect of the soul. Something that's sort of often lost in translation, the feminine side of the soul, and also the feminine, the women who were also Jesus' disciples. We don't get that necessarily in the text. Or do we? Because sometimes, maybe just looking afresh at the translation, we get little hints at it. There are little things that can open up meaning in a new way. So thank you for watching. I'm going to stop it there for now. Lots to think about already. And yeah, just share your thoughts with me if any of this resonates, speaks to you. And if you're not subscribed and you've just landed here and you want to know more about what I'm going on my journey, because this is just about sharing that, and it resonates, then please do subscribe, and I'll see you next time. For now, take care. God bless. Bye-bye.